Welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Alex Kramer. It's now time to take a look at today's business headlines. And for help with that, we're going to welcome in global business analyst Hillary Fordwich and business and markets analyst and Newsmax contributor Seth Denson. Good morning to you both. Happy Friday.
Morning.
Good morning, Alex. Hey, Hillary.
Let's start with the markets like we always do, which closed somewhat surprisingly up yesterday. And this morning, futures are also up ahead of the opening bell. So, Hillary, I'm going to start with you. What should we make of a positive day like this?
Well, if I might say, the positive day is good. I mean, positive days are always good, but the market is really mixed. Look, everything is really almost contradicting itself. Never have we had such high inflation and a receding GDP. At the same time, basically employment has stayed pretty steady. I think the consumer index is very interesting to look at, and we will see later the report from both Colgate and Procter & Gamble and Colgate. Why? Because they will show how consumer confidence is affected. Very importantly, from my perspective, I'm out there in the market. I hear lots of CEOs. I hear business leaders. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. When people are nervous, they don't buy, they don't invest, and they have layoffs. Yeah. I've seen a lot of companies not making decisions. Everybody's waiting and seeing what everybody else is doing. So now to bring that all together to answer your question, given it's a mixed market, given there are mixed indices, businesses aren't quite sure what to do. Some are laying off like Tesla. Amazon is contracting, promising to control their costs and their overhead. But generally across the board, the sentiment is we don't know. We're going to wait and see.
Well, the U.S. economy reporting a second quarter of negative growth. So, Seth, now to you. The question on everyone's mind, can we now officially say that we are in a recession?
Regardless of what this administration tries to spin, let's talk about the textbook definition, because that's what they like to say, of recede, i.e. recession. To go or move back further away from a previous position. We have now had 2 quarters of receding growth. That's 6 months. So yes, let's dispel any spin here. We are in a recession.
Okay, you heard it here, Seth Denson. We are in a recession. The Federal Reserve made another massive interest rate hike just days prior to the GDP report. Hillary, how do all of the rate hikes actually affect America's GDP?
Well, they actually slow, of course, investment, and it's going to really affect the housing market. Why? For every percentage point in raise, that is an additional cost on people's pocketbooks, just like high gas prices. So what this does is the intention, obviously, from the Fed is to slow inflation, to control inflation, and central banks across the world obviously follow the U.S. and are trying to do the same thing. What you have seen, though, the reason the futures are up this morning and markets have been up is markets look to, is the Fed taking control of runaway inflation? And the answer to that is yes. That's why you're sort of seeing these mixed messages and steadying, because inflation is always the great killer. But like I said earlier, because the unemployment numbers aren't as high as they can be during a recession, even though, as Seth is 100% right, of course, contraction in 2 quarters means a recession, but unemployment has stayed so steady, the Fed has raised this in the hope of controlling inflation. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, here's some good news for Ford investors. The stock price revving up following a successful earnings report, and the company is increasing the quarterly dividend from 10 cents per share to 15 cents. So, Seth, what is leading to Ford shifting into gear?
Well, there's a couple of things here, and we all know, I've talked about it a lot of times, I'm a Ford guy. I drive a Ford F-350. I love my diesel truck. That being said, Ford is doing this in large part because they've seen a lot of wholesale growth, and specifically across their various lines. So a lot of businesses utilize Ford. They utilize a good mix of their vehicles. They've taken a lot of retail orders, and their earnings grew 423% in the second quarter. Now, the other thing I will say about this, and we've talked about this a number of times, Alex, I always say a stock is not an asset unless you sell it and make money off it or it's paying you a dividend. I do love me some dividend stocks. However, here's the only negative on this. Ford pre-pandemic averaged around a $10 stock. It spiked in January of this year to 25. So everybody got really excited. It's 14 now. What does that mean? If you own it, hold it. If you don't buy it.
And how about this? Some good news and bad news for Amazon. Their stock sent soaring after the company reported better than expected earnings, beating expectations by nearly $2 billion. However, here comes the bad news. Amazon, their stake in EV maker Rivian, recorded a $3.9 billion loss. So Hillary, what should investors take from these mixed signals?
Well, I guess, and by the way, Seth was 100% right. When you buy and you sell, I would say whenever you're looking at the market, look at fundamentals. Don't look at yesterday, tomorrow, right now, 2 days ago. Look at fundamentals. Amazon is the marketplace of the future. Will we go into another lockdown? Gosh, let's hope we never do. But just generally, the marketplace is conditioned to buy online. And fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, Amazon has promised to cut costs and get control of those overheads. So if you have a company that's doing the right things, number one, has a model for the future, number two, if you're in it for the long haul, then you should buy. Not, though, when it's at its high. So if there's a dip and there's a loss one day or a few days in a row, maybe that's a good time to look.
Interesting. Okay. Finally, NASA was actually created on this date in 1958. But when you think fashion, a government agency doesn't typically come to mind, except, of course, if we're talking about NASA. So, Seth, I mean, honestly, here in New York City, it's kind of hard to walk around without seeing somebody with the NASA logo on a T-shirt or a sweatshirt. What's going on here?
Well, a couple of things. One is you get a lot of celebrities out there wearing this stuff. Second, everybody knows NASA. As a kid, we all dream of being astronauts, shoot for the stars. But here's the third thing, and here's why. Fashion makers don't have to pay to use NASA's logo. It is a licensing free logo. So it's easy to put on there. It's iconic. Everybody loves it. We all support the astronauts. That's why.
Really quickly, Hillary, your thoughts?
Well, because also this is great recruiting. Now these young people think it's hip and great to work for NASA. Maybe it's great once in a while for a government agency to be able to recruit, because the government isn't doing very well recruiting young people. Not normally sexy and attractive, but the NASA logo is making it so.
It certainly is.
That's a great point.
Hillary Fordwich, Seth Denson, thank you guys so much for coming on this morning. Have a fantastic weekend.
Pleasure. Thanks, Alex. Bye, Seth.